The third horseman of the apocalypse, which predicts 93% divorce, is defensiveness. Defensiveness is seeing yourself as a victim to ward off a perceived attack. What does defensive look like? Here's some things. It's when you make excuses for things that you do. In other words, things like, it's not my fault. Well, I didn't mean to do that, or I didn't do it that way. All right. Well, it could have been done this way, but you did it that way. I should have done it that way, but it's defensiveness. Why? You're trying to take something off of you because you're afraid of taking responsibility, right? I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to be caught in the spotlight. All right. I get defensive. So making excuses, right? Another form of defensive is cross-complaining, meeting your partner's complaint or criticism with one of your own. Well, yeah, I can see why you say that, but you also, and I remember the time that you cross-complain, all right? Another way of being defensive, you ready, is just ignoring what they said. Just going right on over it. Ignore it. Keep spouting out what you want. Another form of defensive is when you disagree with them and then you cross-complain. See, cross-complaining is one form, but another is, well, I disagree with you, and here's why, and then you complain to them. That might sound like this. How about, that's not true, because you're the one who. That ain't true. You're the one who. How about this one? Well, I stayed on the phone longer because you got it, and then you complain. I did this because you did that. Disagreeing and then cross-complaining. Here's another one, and this one infuriates people. It's a form of defensiveness. It's when you do the old, yes, but, and then you go on to talk about behind the but. What that word but, what it does, it might say something like, yes, you're really a wonderful person. Yes, I understand that you really meant well, but, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You see, once you throw in the word but there, you've actually invalidated everything in front. Because what you're really saying is, this is what I really want to talk about. This is what's most important, not in front. All right. It's when you start off agreeing to part, but you end up disagreeing, basically. How about repeating yourself without paying attention to what the other person's saying? Another form of disagreeing. And then another form of disagreeing is whining. Well, it's not fair. You always get to, how come I can't? All forms of disagreeing. But why do we get defensive as humans? Why do we get defensive? And I'll tell you, it's really simple. Now, by the way, one of my favorite quotes is actually by Einstein. Einstein said, make things simple, but not simpler. Got it? Make things simple, but not too simple, basically. And he also said, if you can't explain something simply, then you don't understand it. I found in my profession, even in the ministry and among counselors, we like to explain things to where they're complex. Why? So you'll be impressed with how much we know. You'll be impressed with all that we know. In the end, though, you're impressed with all that I know, but you're back there going, huh? What does all that mean? I don't get it. I get really validated if someone walks up to me in a conference or a lecture I do, and they go, Rick, some of the things you said today were new, and some wasn't. I kind of already knew it already, but you put it in a way that makes me connect to it. That's a great teacher. Not the one who explains everything so complexly. You're like, what? And you walk out of there going, huh? Einstein's right. Make things simple, just not too simple. Complexity confuses people. It is a great gift to explain things simply. I'm a closet redneck from North Georgia. Simple's good for this old boy, all right? And so all humans have a need for, I told you it's going to be simple, self-protection. That's why we do it. We're just protecting ourselves. We're protecting ourselves emotionally from a perceived threat, from an attack, from being invalidated, from being unacceptable, from being rejected. It's all of defensiveness. Why? It's all self-protection because the brain down here, it's wired to protect you. We have not matured emotionally. These emotional reactions that we have, i.e. defensiveness, is a desire to feel good about myself and that I'm safe and secure. So whenever you get triggered to the low brain reactions, fight, flight, and freeze, and you start attacking with the four horsemen, but in defensiveness, it's really you're feeling threatened. And so you're trying to ward off a perceived threat so you can feel good about yourself, so you can feel that you're lovable or acceptable or that you matter. In defensiveness, when we're in it, actually shuts down communication. It doesn't open communication up. It shuts it down and it'll bury goodwill. Remember, we talked in the early part of our life tonight about the four protectors of an us. The four protectors of an us will counteract the four horsemen. Goodwill is one of the 4 protectors. I'll review those for those who may join me a little bit late here. They're goodwill, respect, humility, and empathy. And when you live your life that way, I promise you, the 4 horsemen won't show up. When you're in defensive, you're shutting down communication and you're bearing goodwill. And what happens then, you take a simple human exchange and you turn it into a very heavy issue that never had to go there in the first place. And so you never, ever really end up discussing the issue because defensiveness won't let you discuss the issue. It's really about protecting my ego, my sense of worth, my sense of value. I need to feel safe and loved, and I need to put you down and defend myself from you. So you start criticizing or move to contempt. Another way that how we get defensive also has to do with your childhood. You see, I grew up in a broken home where I was always afraid of being shocked with a cow prod. My stepmother really never validated me. I knew everything she didn't like about me all my life. Never knew one thing to this day that I did that she was ever approved or accepted or appreciated about me. And that's okay. That's a part of her woundedness, right? But your childhood informs how you're going to respond to attacks and criticism as an adult as well, you see. And when all of that ends up in what's called the fight, flight, or freeze response, which are known as the stress responses of the lower order animal brain. And if you want to deal with conflict from down here, which is purely a reactive brain, which is all about safety, feel free. The 4 horsemen are going to show up. But if you can move to compassion and you already have a healthy sense of self-worth and you know how to regulate that lower order brain, you can keep the 4 horsemen out and have goodwill, respect, humility, and empathy. You begin to realize there's no goodwill in defensive. And by being defensive and counter complaining, it's actually disrespectful. There's no goodwill in it. And it actually says, I really don't care about how you think and feel. All right. So defensiveness is the third of those. All right. How can you monitor defensiveness? Here's some thoughts for you. Talk about the issues that you have in non-blaming, non-attacking ways. Relate well teaches you skills to do that. And this is really important. Ask your partner how you're coming across to this. One of the things that I used to do with Luella, I would watch her body language and I'd listen to how she is when I'm talking about something. If I noticed she started to shut down or withdraw, her eyes looked away, I would stop and go, how am I coming across right now? And I'd get her feedback. One of the things that my mentor taught me a long time ago was that we actually create in others how they are as a way of being. Example, I was complaining about Luella to Lori many years ago, Dr. Lori Gordon, my mentor, many years ago. And Lori said to me, do you know why Luella is the way she is with you? And I said, I know why. She goes, why? I said, well, because she grew up in an alcoholic home with a lot of abuse and craziness. Lori, always gracious to me, but always spoke her truth. Looked at me and said, are you open to another perspective? It's like, yes, ma'am. Almost word for word. Rick, have you considered the possibility that Luella is the way she is with you because of how you are, and this is the phrase, as a way of being? You taught her to be that way. You trained her to be that way. What would you expect her to do? Novel idea that we actually create in others how they are based on how we are as a way of being. Now, Dr. Phil on his TV show says it a little simply. He says, you teach people how to be around you. And so because that was actually true, and a phrase that came up for myself in my own transformation was the way I think I come across is not the way I am coming across. The way I think I'm being experienced is not the way I am being experienced. What people do is they defend how they think they are or believe they are, but in the end, it's how you are that matters. So I would watch her body language and then I'd go, how am I coming across right now? And she'd tell me. And whatever she said, I said, well, if I'm coming across that way, forgive me. I don't mean to come across that way. And then I shift how I was. I began to ask her to give me feedback. Also, I began to develop self-awareness. Self-awareness is the fundamental of emotional intelligence. You cannot have the other competencies of emotional intelligence without self-awareness. It's the first one. And once you have self-awareness, you can develop the second one, which is self-control. But you can't have self-control if you're not self-aware. About 2 years ago, I think it was in January 2 years ago, I read an article of a study that was done nationwide. 78% of Americans report they are self-aware. 78% of Americans report they have self-awareness. But according to the data, only 26% actually are. But I chuckled when I read that and I said to my wife, this is interesting. Most people are not self-aware to know that they're not self-aware. Self-awareness is that one core piece that you need to develop to become a healthy, mature adult. Why? Because when I'm self-aware, I'm present to myself and what I'm doing and what I'm feeling inside, and I can stop myself. Self-control. So you begin to develop self-awareness, and in so doing, own your own stuff. Take responsibility for your choices. That's maturity. And lastly, and this is really important, to move away from defensiveness, believe in your own value and worth. When we're defensive, it's a sign that you don't.